One of the things that's not covered in the creating of dynamic web pages manual is MySQL and web servers. So there is notes in the back here which state where you can go to read up on MySQL and that. There's a program out there called Mamp, and I want to show you how to use Mamp briefly and to install it. It allows you to run a web server on your Mac and also allows you to run MySQL databases. And it's a very easy, simple application to use to help you to get through this project. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to start our web browser, of course. And we need to go to www.mamp.info. Now, what is Mamp? Mamp is an Apache web server with MySQL and PHP, or for Mac. They've just created for Windows as well, although I haven't messed with that. I'm just wanting to show you how to get this done on your Mac, because doing our course, we're all given Macs. So it makes more sense to try and use that than trying to waste our hard drive having Windows. So just go ahead, click on Downloads, then click Download, and you'll see that the download will start. I'm just going to cancel that real quick because I've already done this. Go to your Downloads and double click on the Mamp Pro package to install it. Now just click Continue, Continue. Now you can read the license agreement if you choose, but the fact is we want to use this software, so we're pretty much stuck with whatever they want anyway, so just go ahead and agree to it. Okay, now you're going to go ahead, just do a default install. Your MacBook's going to ask you to authenticate yourself. Okay, and just install the software. Okay, now once that's done, you'll see it says that Mamp and Mamp Pro have both been installed. Now we're not going to use Mamp Pro because, well, it costs money to register at the moment and we only need it for the one server. So go back into your computer, go to your applications. You'll see a grey folder for Mamp and a grey folder for Mamp Pro. And go into your Mamp folder, find the Mamp application and start it. Now, I've already had Mamp Pro installed, and so I want to ignore this. I'm getting a message asking me if I want to launch one or the other. If you've done that, then you just want to stay with Mamp. Okay, now once it comes up, you're going to get your start screen for Mamp, and it's going to show you that MySQL can be administered with PHP MyAdmin, which is really what you want to do. It gives you an example of how to link to the database or to connect to the MySQL server. Okay, you get your PHP information, so if you need to know what version of PHP is installed, it'll tell you right here. And it should tell you your limitations, it should tell you your download sizes and everything like that. And for now, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, now I'm just going to close that and go back to here. Now this is your Mamp screen, and you'll see it has an Apache server and your MySQL server, and it should say stop servers, so they're actually running at the background. So the website or the page we're just on is your start page. Okay. Now your preferences. You want to make sure that at startup opens and start servers when starting Mamp. The reason being because you want to make sure they're running when you're working, and if you forget, then you're going to get frustrated and you're going to get lost. Okay. This here, go over to your web server tab, and you're going to see exactly where your web server is located in the document root. If you're connecting to a proper website, that would be your root folder. htdocs would be your root folder, and that would be where you put your index files. And then of course you'd create your subfolders, your images, your scripts, your so forth under there. So basically just leave that as it is, but that lets you know exactly where everything is. And you're pretty much ready to roll and moving on to the next step of creating your database. Okay, so now that I've shown you how to install Mamp and how to get things going, before I get into creating the database, there's a few things you have to consider about the assignment and the database that you're creating. I've done database creation and database programming for many years, and without planning up front, you can really get yourself lost and make a real mess of things. Take a good hard look at your layout and all of your plans and determine what fields you're going to need. Now, if you've never done databases before or you know nothing about it, there's a couple things that you will need to know. First of all, you always need to create an index or a key field in every database. Now, this is usually an integer or a number, okay? And what that does is that just numbers everything sequentially in the file and gives everything its own individual unique identification. So when you're creating your database, I strongly recommend that you start with creating an ID field first. From there, you want to start labeling and figuring out the names of the fields that you wish to use. So just thinking about this assignment and looking at my website mock-up and my plans, there's a few things, there's a couple of different tables that I'm going to need in my database. One, I'm going to need a user table, and two, I'm also going to need a products table to store the information on the products that the golf course is selling. I'm just going to go into numbers here and click on a new document, and I really only need a blank sheet. Okay. Now I'm just going to create a spreadsheet here, and I'm going to give you an idea of how a database works. For those of you who don't really know, it's pretty much simply like a spreadsheet in one respect. Everything is done by an index field, which in this case will be my A column, and we'll call that, this is my user table, so we'll say user IDX. Okay, now that's how I'm going to identify the index. Okay, now the index field will be automatically created by the database every time we add a new record. So it's just going to be numeric. So the first one's going to end up being 1. Okay, but for right now, what else are we going to need for a user? Well, do we want to store their name, their personal details? If so, we can choose just name, and we can have their first and last name all in the one field. Let's see, we're going to give them a username. Okay, and of course they're going to need a password. Let's try an email address. We definitely want that from our user. Okay. Now, basically, this is the structure or part of the structure that I'm planning for my database, okay? Now, under here, I'm going to put how big I want each field, and I'm going to say that, let's say 35 will be my size, my field size. Okay, username. How many characters do we want to give them for a username? Let's say 10. That's pretty good. And we'll say 12 for a password because people's passwords are getting longer and harder each day. Okay, now email address is tough because some domain names are getting really long these days, so I like to leave about 30 for an email address. Hopefully that's more than enough, but this is for a basic example, so we can just stick with that. So now I've given myself a basic idea of what I'm going to use for, or what sort of information I'm going to need for my users table. Okay, let me see, we have our products table. So what sort of information are we going to need for that? Well, first of all, every product is going to have an index field, okay, which is the key field or the key identifier, okay. Now we want to give it a name or description of the product, so let's call it description. No, better yet, name. Then we'll put a description. And now we're also going to want to store the image link. Okay. Now, is there anything else that we want to store for these at the moment? Do we want to, well, maybe later they're going to want to put the price in. But for now, I think let's just keeping this simple. We won't worry about that. Okay. So now this is the basic information that we need to create this database. Now, the nice thing about databases is the way they're made today, especially MySQL, you can always add fields later or make the databases larger. Okay, so now basically I've created myself my two table layouts. Now my name, once again, how big do we want a name field for an item? Let's just say 20 for now. A description. We don't want a real big description, so let's just say that's 100 characters because you know, we can make a note field later. Now an image link, these can be kind of long and tedious. So because you have to remember that you may be using a web address, you may be using the web address plus multiple folders, and then the file name, so this can get rather long. So I would say use a note length of 255, or just say 254. So it's one short of a note field. Your indexes should be what are called integer fields. Okay, and these are key fields. Okay, so keeping this in mind, now that we've sort of planned our database, let's go ahead and go back into Mamp. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to create the database. So when you're brought up to the start page, you'll see MySQL can be administered with PHP MyAdmin. Okay, and here's your server information. Now you can change all that if you want, but right now it's not very important. So because it's all local and it's on your own computer, no one else is going to get access to it. But click on PHP MyAdmin. Now what I've done is I've already created a database there, but I'm going to just ignore that and we'll just create a new one here and we'll click on databases. So I'll call it Swing Golf and just click create. Now that's already created there. Now you have to remember that these are case sensitive. So when accessing the database from here on in, we're going to have to use the capital S and the capital G when accessing it from code in PHP. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is we have to create the tables. Okay, so we said we were going to create the user table, and just clicking back here on my spreadsheet, we had a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields. So we need 5 columns. And we'll click go. First one, we called it was USR IDX, and that's our index field. It is of type integer. Okay, it's a number. Okay. Oh, there's one. Okay. Now index, yes, it is a primary index. Okay. AI is for automatically increment. Okay. So here we've chosen and we've said this is a primary field. It must exist and it must auto increment every time a new record is created. Okay. Now we come back and we said that our name field was going to be 35 characters, so we'll just give name, Now, it's not an integer, it's either a varchar or text. Now, varchar means a variable character, okay? So it can actually be a set of numbers or text, okay? And I'm just going to say that I want 35. Okay, then we're going to create our next field, which is our username. Okay, now username, once again, I would use varchar 20. Okay, our password. Okay, so we just said 12 for our password. Okay, so now just go ahead and click save, and you'll see that it's already created your database for you. Okay, now you can make modifications and so forth here, but right now that's not very important. Okay, our columns, it's going to show basically your structure of your database. So basically we've now created the user database. So go ahead now and create your products table. It's pretty much the same as what we just walked through in creating a user table. So go ahead and do that. And if you have any problems, go ahead and email me at david@collegestudent.net.au.